Hi, my name is Lucy. I'm a whore, and welcome to my bedroom. This is the very first episode of my podcast. I'm a little bit excited, a little bit nervous. So let's just get into it. Today's episode, I'm gonna dive into my whole past and my history with sex work, where I started, everything I've done, and how I've gotten to where I am now. Because I've dabbled in a lot of different things. So let's take it all the way back. I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. When I was a kid and a teenager, I was in training to be a professional ballet dancer. So when I was 17, I moved to the United States for ballet school. And when I was 18, I moved to Copenhagen for my first job as a professional ballet dancer. I lived in Copenhagen for a year. Beautiful city. I still love it. And then I left that company because my director was an asshole, as they often are in ballet. And I wanted to find a job somewhere else in Europe. So I decided to move to Berlin temporarily, just to have it as a home base while I auditioned for other companies. Um, Berlin has a low cost of living. It's really easy to get a visa. There's a big dance community. It's kind of like central geographically in Europe. So it just kind of made sense to have Berlin as my home base. So while I was here in Berlin and doing auditions, I needed a way to make money. I had done a little bit of modeling when I was a teenager and had been encouraged to do it more. So I decided to try doing it in Berlin. Shortly after I started modeling, I got a request from a photographer to do nude photos. And I had honestly never considered doing nudes. And when he asked me to do it, I honestly couldn't think of a reason not to. Like, I was very comfortable in my body. I planned to work in ballet for the rest of my life. So if I had nudes of me on the internet, it might cause people to gossip, but it wouldn't cause me to like lose my job or anything. So I decided to go for it, and I thought it would be a fun experience. It was. And that was kind of the beginning of my nude modeling career, which I did for many years. Nude modeling is not sex work, but I kind of see it as like a cousin to sex work. And I do see my nude modeling as me kind of dipping my toe into the world of sex work for the very first time. So that was less than a year after I moved to Berlin. About a year after I moved to Berlin, I actually decided to quit ballet. I had almost gotten a job in a ballet company in Romania, and when I didn't get it, I realized that I was actually so thankful that I didn't get it because I wanted to stay in Berlin. When you're a ballet dancer, it really consumes your entire life. Like, you don't get to choose where you live. You have to move to whatever city or country you get a job in. You work like 60 plus hours a week. When you're not working, you're resting and trying to recover like from what your body has been through during work. And my time in Berlin without a job, which was really the first time in my life where I had ample free time and had freedom to explore things, I started to realize that there were other things in my life that could give me the fulfillment that ballet did. Because ballet was really fulfilling to me. Like, I really did love it. So I realized there were other things that could give me that fulfillment, and those things wouldn't require me to sacrifice my entire life for it. So I quit ballet. And when I quit, I really had no plan for what I was gonna do for a living. I felt like I was just jumping off into the deep end. So I really spent some time researching and thinking about what I could do to make money. And I was living in Germany on a freelance visa, so I legally couldn't get a job at a cafe or doing customer service or something like that. I was only allowed to work as a freelancer. So after a lot of looking and deliberating, I decided to start doing camming, like webcamming on sites like Chatterbait or MFC. And I picked this because I thought I would be good at it. I thought I would be comfortable doing it, and it would offer me a lot of flexibility. Like, I could work whenever I wanted to. However, at the time, I was going through a legal proceeding back in Canada, which I'm not going to go into at all. But when I decided to start camming, an adult in my life told me that, there is a chance that if you do camming and it's like on the internet publicly, as camming is, it could be used against you in this legal proceeding because, the other side could say like, "Oh, like she's sexually deviant, like blah blah blah," and use it against me. Um and so when I realized that, I decided to postpone camming because this said legal proceeding was very important to me and I didn't want to do anything that could influence it in a negative way. So camming was put on hiatus until this was over. So I went back to the drawing board about what I could do to make money, and I ended up settling on doing sugaring. So being a sugar baby and looking for sugar daddies. I chose this because to me, it felt like a form of sex work where I would be in control and stay comfortable. In sugaring, you almost always will meet up with a potential sugar daddy, or like pots as they're called. You'll meet up with a potential for something called a meet and greet, where you just meet in a public place, like for coffee or for a drink, and just chat and get to know each other and see if you vibe and if you want to start an arrangement. So I like that because it enabled me to feel safe and it enabled me to always pick who I would have sex with, basically. I wasn't just going to be booked by people I didn't know and have to show up and sleep with them. I was able to say no to men who I felt were not respectful or who I didn't feel comfortable around. So I started sugaring in, it must have been the summer of 2016. And I had some decent success with it. I was on the website Seeking Arrangements. It's now called Seeking, but back then it was called Seeking Arrangements. It was also much better back then. It was way easier to find serious sugar daddies. So I had a few. They would always pay me pay per meet. In sugaring, payment either happens pay per meet or with a monthly allowance. I only did pay per meet, and I think I just had 3 or 4 different sugar daddies during this period, not all overlapping, like most of them were kind of short term. I think my first one was this American businessman who was visiting Berlin, but I don't remember for sure if he was the first or not. But I do remember how I felt after my first sugar date. I had been really struggling with money. I was unemployed essentially. And I remember being in the cab home from this date when I was holding the money in my hands. At the time, I was getting 500 euros per date, which is not a lot, but for me, it felt like a lot. This was also 8 years ago. And just holding this money in my hand, and I felt so empowered and so relieved that I had gone out and I had made this money in a way that felt good to me, in a way that I enjoyed, and now I could pay my rent. So I think I only did sugaring for like 6 months or something, and then this legal proceeding I had in Canada was finalized, so I decided to just drop sugaring and go into camming, which looking back was kind of a silly decision. I did have one consistent sugar daddy at that time, and I probably should have kept him because I actually liked him, and again, it was consistent income. I kind of expected to just start camming and like make a bunch of money from it right away, and that is not how it works. But I was, like, 20 at the time, and I had a boyfriend at the time who used to make a living from doing camming with his former partner. So, we decided to do camming together, and that gave me a lot of confidence as well because he had done it before, he knew the details, like, he knew what it took, basically, to be successful at it. So, we started camming on Chatterbait as Lucy and Hunter, and I'll give a quick side note about why I chose the name Lucy Huxley. So my ex, his porn name was Hunter S. Johnson, which is a play on Hunter S. Thompson. And I wanted a name that would kind of be along the same theme as his. So I decided to kind of go for a drug themed name. I was 20, I was living in Berlin, I had discovered psychedelics for the first time, I would never pick a name for these reasons now, but I'm just being honest about what my thought process was. So, I decided to go for the first name Lucy because Lucy is a slang name for acid, and I loved acid. And I decided to go for the last name Huxley because of the famous writer Aldous Huxley. Not because I particularly loved his work. I mean, I do think he's an amazing writer. But the reason I picked his last name is because he died while he was getting a 100 microgram IV drip of LSD. Like he was off his face high on acid when he died. So that's why I picked this name. So I decided on the name Lucy Huxley. Me and him started camming together as Lucy and Hunter. We had a little bit of success with it. It's a lot easier to be successful doing camming when you're a couple than when you're a solo woman, just because there's less competition. But we weren't like raking in the big bucks or anything. So probably about 6 months or so into us doing camming, I met a girl in Berlin who had worked with this really nice female-run ethical porn company, and it sounded really nice. So I decided to get in contact with them. I had never really particularly had an interest in doing mainstream porn, but when I heard about this company that was very focused on girls actually genuinely enjoying ourselves and being able to be in control of things and just having women on set, it sounded really nice to me. So I got in contact with them. The company was Ersties, and I shot my very first porn with them. It was a really nice experience. I think I shot a couple of films with them that year. They were all very chill, mostly solo stuff. And basically, that was the beginning of me doing porn on and off for the next like 4 years or so. I got to do some pretty cool films with some pretty great companies, but it was really always an inconsistent thing for me because I was very picky about which companies I worked with and who I worked with. So I would mostly just do like a few films a year. It was never like a really consistent form of income for me. I really enjoyed it because I was majorly an exhibitionist at this time. And this is also why I enjoyed camming. And part of the reason I decided to do it was because I got off on the idea of people watching me, like people watching me on live cam shows or filming stuff and knowing that people would be watching me, or just being on a porn set and people watching you on set really turned me on. Like I really, really enjoyed it. So that made a lot of it so much fun for me. And the porn companies I worked with, it was really all about like real sex scenes and real pleasure. It was never really about faking anything. So it was just really most of the time a genuinely enjoyable experience for me. And also like during this time, I was also doing my nude modeling still under a different name. Lucy Huxley has always been my porn and sex work name, and I had a different name for my more like softcore stuff. In 2019, I got an email from a guy who was a big fan of my porn films, and I had made a couple of custom cigar smoking videos for him. And he was visiting Berlin and wanted to know if he could pay to meet up with me. And I agreed to do it. And it was a good experience. I met him in his hotel. I think it was only like 1 or 2 hours. The funny thing about that meetup was actually like we got up to his room and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna put some music on." And I was like, "Great. I love having music on while we have sex." He turns on the hotel TV, and you know how like in hotels when you first turn on the TV, there's usually like a 30-second or 1 minute kind of commercial for the hotel, showing clips of the hotel with like this very generic elevator music in the background. So he turned on the TV and just left it on that channel. So it was the same 30 seconds of generic elevator music looping on repeat for the entire time we were having sex. But overall, it was a good time. I enjoyed it. And yeah, that was my first time technically doing escorting. In 2019, I was also becoming more disillusioned with doing modeling. Male photographers who shoot female nudes are just really a unique type of douchebag, is all I'm gonna say about that. So at the end of 2019, I decided to start working at a strip club. I had been hanging out with friends one day, and this one girl who was hanging out with us had just had her first shift at the strip club like the weekend before. And she was like, I made 600 euros on my first night. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. Because I had been struggling with money at the time. I was so sick of being broke. I obviously had experience in professional dance. I was still nervous to start working at the strip club because it was such an unknown thing for me. But I had some friends who had worked at clubs. I asked them for recommendations. I asked around about what the best clubs to work at were. I ended up deciding to work at the most expensive strip club in Berlin because I wanted to make the most money. But I had also heard quite bad things about the management at this club, particularly. And I decided that I was willing to take the risk. And, from my years in ballet, I can handle quite a lot of shit from bosses. So I decided to go for it. And at this club, they also do extras in the private rooms. So in stripping, extras refers to doing things like giving hand jobs or blow jobs or having sex in the private rooms. In Germany, especially, this is super common because sex work is legal. In places like America where sex work is illegal, it does happen, but not so much. So at the club I was at, we could choose if we wanted to do extras or not. There was never any pressure put on us, but we had to give a portion of all the money that we made in private rooms to the front desk. So I started working at the strip club. When I went to work there, I actually wanted to pick a new name. I didn't necessarily wanted to be Lucy Huxley at the strip club because I wanted some separation between my porn work and my strip club persona. So I had a new name picked out. I can't even remember what it was. But I went there and they were like, we already have a girl with that name. You can't use that. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll just be Lucy then. So the name stuck. I was Lucy at the strip club. Overall, I enjoyed working at the strip club. I enjoyed the dancing part. I enjoyed meeting people that I normally would never meet or interact with in my normal social life. But there were definitely cons to it. The late nights were the worst part of it for me. The club I was working at was open from 9:30 p.m. until 7 a.m., and we had to be there the whole time. If you have ever worked night shifts, you know that it ruins your entire life. It is so awful. I was only working at the club 2 nights a week, and it was ruining my entire life. Even on days when I was not working, my sleep schedule was just so messed up. I felt so exhausted all the time. And that is essentially the main reason why I didn't do stripping long term. There were also some other negative things about the club. A lot of the other girls were catty and not super nice to me. I was hoping to find a really nice community, and that was not really the case. There was nothing super dramatic that happened, but it was just like they weren't warm and friendly. A couple of them were, but mostly not. The management was also not super nice. They treated all of us girls like we were idiots, which was kind of a new experience for me. Even when I was working as a ballet dancer and being looked down upon by directors and things like this, I was never treated with such blatant disrespect and treated in a way that just made it abundantly clear that they thought I was stupid. Like they just thought we were all fucking idiots. So that was not super enjoyable. I ended up stopping stripping when COVID started in 2020 because all of the clubs shut down, obviously. And when the clubs reopened in like the end of summer 2020, I decided not to go back because I was starting school at the time and I knew that there was no way I would be able to handle working these late nights and going to school at the same time. So in 2020, this is when I also started doing OnlyFans. So I had already had a Patreon account for a couple of years for my nude modeling. And obviously, OnlyFans came onto the scene in 2020. And I knew I didn't want to do it for my porn. And wasn't sure if it would be the right thing to do for my nude modeling because OnlyFans was like very clearly porn thing. But some other new models that I knew started doing OnlyFans and they recommended it to me. So I ended up starting it in the summer of 2020. And I made some pretty good money. Like, not crazy amounts, but I made enough money to live comfortably in Berlin, which is really what I wanted. And around this time, I also decided to stop doing porn. This was for a few reasons. I kind of stopped enjoying it. The last few shoots I did were just not really so fun for me, and the whole reason I had been doing porn was because it was fun. So I was like, I'm not gonna force myself to do this anymore if I'm not actually enjoying it. And I also decided in 2020 that I wanted to have a monogamous relationship. So prior to this, I had always been in polyamorous relationships. My first relationship in Berlin was an open relationship, and after that, they were all polyamorous. And in 2020, I came to the realization by myself that I wanted my next relationship to be monogamous. It was just a personal thing, it was just how I felt. So for me, working in porn was not going to be compatible with the type of monogamy I wanted. So I decided to stop doing porn because of that, because of the other reasons I mentioned. So Lucy Huxley officially retired in 2020. I am going to talk more about porn and all of my experiences in it and more about why I decided to stop in my next episode. My next episode is going to be all about porn and walking you guys through what it's like to work in this industry. So, at the end of 2020, or like the very beginning of 2021, I decided to quit doing modeling. I had been really struggling with feeling like I wasn't in control of my own body. I hope I can explain this in the proper way. I mean, I was in control of my own body, but for example, I would always get comments from photographers about how it was so great that I didn't have any tattoos. And, they would say to me, like, please never get tattoos. I would be booked because I didn't have tattoos. And I wanted to get tattoos. And I couldn't because I would lose work if I got tattoos. Like, this is just one example, but it's maybe the biggest example of why I felt like I wasn't in control of my own body. I would have reoccurring dreams about wanting to dye my hair blue, and I didn't want to dye my hair blue in real life, but I didn't have the option to. If I were to dye my hair a crazy color, I would lose work. And this feeling of not being in control of the choices I made about my own body was just really getting to me, combined with the fact that I was very rarely enjoying shoots anymore. I would still absolutely love working with photographers who were respectful to me and whose work I really enjoyed, but most of the work I was doing was not like that. Either the photographers were not great, like their work wasn't great, or they were not great people, and I really just wasn't enjoying it anymore. So I decided to completely quit modeling for other photographers, and my OnlyFans income really enabled me to do that because I was able to just rely on that going forward. When I quit modeling, I got like 6 tattoos and a septum piercing within like 3 months because I was like, now I can do whatever the fuck I want. I am doing it. So that was great, but I also stopped enjoying doing OnlyFans for a few reasons. Again, it's a bit complicated. It was difficult for me because I felt like I was just being seen online for this fragment of who I actually am. Because the thing with online content, no matter how genuine you try to be on social media and on OnlyFans and places like this, no one can ever actually see you for the whole person that you are. And looking back, I think that this was really a problem for me because I didn't have strong friendships and relationships in my personal life. So I was really relying on social media and on my work for this type of social interaction and to be seen by people. And that's why it was so difficult to only be seen as this fragmented fantasy projection by the people who were interacting with me online. And, my mental health also wasn't great at the time, and I struggled with not really having any working hours and constantly feeling like I had to create content. No matter what I was doing, there was always something in the back of my mind like, oh, I could film this for Instagram and it could be content. I could take off my top and do photos for OnlyFans and it will be content. I really didn't have any clear work life separation. So I really was not enjoying OnlyFans for a while, but I was making money from it, like I said, and it was really my main source of income. So I didn't feel comfortable just quitting. In the fall of 2021, I did fully quit. Um, it just got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like for myself, I need to quit. I need to move on to the next thing. And it was kind of like when I quit ballet, where I didn't really have a plan for what I was going to do. I decided to try and be a photographer full time. I had been doing photography for a while, so I wanted to try and take the jump into doing it, but it's very difficult to make a living as a photographer, and I didn't know if it would work. I kind of accidentally fell into working as a social media manager. My brand new boyfriend, who I had started dating in the summer of 2021, offered me a job doing social media at his startup. And a few months later, I was offered a job doing social media for a porn company that I used to work for. And it turns out I was really good at it and I enjoyed it. The porn company, I made them go viral on TikTok many times. My boyfriend's startup, I also got to do photography for them. So basically, for 2 years, 3 years, I guess. Yeah, 3 years from 2021 until 2024. I was working as a social media manager and I was not doing any form of sex work. And this boyfriend that I had at the time was really uncomfortable with my past in sex work. When we started dating, I was doing my OnlyFans, but it was very softcore stuff and no porn. And that was the only sexy type of work I was doing. Everything else was in my past. And then I quit doing OnlyFans while we were together. I really quit doing OnlyFans for myself. And I strayed away from all these expressions of sexuality that had been so important to me. And I do think that was very internal, the negative aspects of everything really affected me so much, and I really just needed a break from being in front of the camera and from sharing myself online and to focus on myself. But I really think I stayed away from these things much longer than I would have because of this boyfriend. He really had a lot of negative feelings and anxiety about my past in porn, especially. He was always so scared that people he knew would find it on the internet because, I mean, my porn is on the internet. It's going to be there forever. I have no control over it. And I'm at peace with that. If people I know in real life find it, then it is what it is. If they have a negative reaction to it, that's on them. And I don't want them to be a part of my life. But this ex of mine really had a problem with it. And when we were together, I allowed myself to absorb some of his negative viewpoints and feelings about sex work. All of this stuff with him was really stemmed from his own insecurities and feeling like he was less than me because I had this massive past with all of this sexual experience and I had done all these crazy things. And yeah, I really feel like I dimmed myself down in a lot of ways for him for this relationship, which was a choice I made. I'm not explaining this to like blame it all on him. Like I was agreeing to be in that relationship and to do those things. Another thing that happened during this relationship is I became convinced that I was vanilla. I have always been very kinky, since I started really exploring my sexuality. I got quite serious into kink. I had some very serious BDSM dynamics in my past relationship. And with this most recent ex, our sex was very vanilla. And not because of him, I felt like it was also me that wanted that with him. And a BDSM dynamic just really never felt natural to what we shared between us. So throughout our relationship, I just thought that, like, oh, my sexuality has changed. This BDSM stuff is a thing of my past. I had also completely lost any desire for exhibitionism. I just thought I was very vanilla. I thought that all of my sex work days were behind me, my BDSM days were behind me. I had a normal job, a normal life. And then we broke up in August of last year, of 2023. I broke up with him and really began a journey into reconnecting to my own sexuality, my own artistic expression, my own power. When him and I broke up, he had been out of the country for 6 months. So I hadn't had sex at all for 6 months when we broke up. And I started getting on the dating apps pretty soon after we broke up, but things just weren't happening. I wanted to have sex with somebody. I feel like I wasn't being super picky, but I do have standards. It just wasn't happening. So I ended up not having sex for 8 months total, which is crazy. I am a sexual person. I have never not had sex that long, like, since I started having sex. It was it was awful, but that dry spell ended up ending in such a perfect way. I kind of, like, through coincidence, got back in touch with an old fling of mine. Him and I had fallen out of touch because I got in a relationship, he moved out of Berlin, and we ended up messaging, and it turned out he was gonna be in Berlin that weekend. I was like, "Great, come to my apartment." He came, we had sex. It was so good, and, like, it was literally life-changing because having sex with him made me realize that I was still very, very kinky. And I had actually not lost any of my desire for kink and any of my desire for sexuality in my past relationship. It had just been repressed, but it was all still there. Because, yeah, the sex we had was so intense and kinky, and it just reawakened all of this stuff inside of me, which made me feel really angry about my past relationship and how I had repressed so much of myself in it. And it also made me feel excited for the future and to be able to re-explore my sexuality and rediscover my kinks as the person I am today. So that was in October of last year. About a month later, a funny coincidence happened where somebody messaged me on Telegram and he was like, "Hey, I have your number stored from when I was on Seeking Arrangements in 2016. I'm going to be in Berlin next weekend. Are you still open to doing paid dates?" This was crazy to me. Like the fact that this man had kept my contact information and remembered me for this long. I had never met him. I don't know if we had ever had a conversation before, but this made me consider, like, would I do this? So I thought about it and I was like, I'm single, I'm actively dating. I want to have fun, casual relationships. I especially want to date guys who pay for me. So, when sugaring works out, you get to have a fun relationship with somebody that you genuinely enjoy being with, and you also get paid for it. It's really a lot more complicated than that. I don't recommend starting doing sugaring if that's what you think it is. But I was like, you know what? Why not go for it? So I said yes to this guy. He ended up canceling, but because of him, I decided to start up my seeking profile again and start actively sugaring. Berlin is really not a great city for sugaring. Um, just culturally, Germany is not great for it. There's not a lot of people with a lot of money in Berlin. And in Berlin, if people want sex, there's so many avenues to do that with. So I didn't have a ton of success here. I did go back to Canada for the holidays in December. And when I did that, I found so much success in sugaring, and I really had a fantastic time. I was only there for like 3 weeks, and I made a lot of money, and I saw two guys while I was there. One of them was a lawyer with a cocaine addiction, and we had sex in his law office, like in the boardroom at midnight. It was super hot. Just overall, like a great experience. And I was just like, I love making money this way. I love having sex. I love seducing men. I love meeting new people. I love these crazy experiences. So when I came back to Berlin, I was pretty serious about continuing to do sugaring regularly. I will also say I was still kind of trying to be a social media manager at this point. One of the reasons I decided to start sugaring was because I lost most of my social media clients in like the fall of 2023. So I was struggling for money. Sugaring could obviously help with that. And, through those next months, I was still really actively trying to get more social media clients and trying to kind of get that to work. So I am a very spiritual person, which is something that I'm sure will come up on my podcast, but I'll try not to talk about it too much because I know it annoys some people. But I really firmly believe that when you are walking in your dharma, when you are walking on your life path, the universe meets you halfway. And I felt like with social media, the universe was not meeting me halfway anymore. When I first started working in social media, I was getting these great opportunities, things were working out, I was enjoying my work. And, at this point in the winter, I just was really struggling. I was not getting any opportunities, even though I knew I was really good at what I was doing. I wasn't getting excited about my work anymore. And, the universe was really just not meeting me halfway anymore. And I started to see that with sex work, the universe was really meeting me halfway. I really started having amazing experiences. I was getting really excited about it. And I really just felt like it was right for me. So I decided to stop pursuing social media and do sex work full time. And this was a really big and really serious decision for me. I did not take this lightly because, any normal person, conventional society would say, why on earth would you give up your regular successful career as a freelancer working for businesses, doing a good job? Why the fuck would you give that up to be a prostitute? And it raised all sorts of questions for me also about like what my future was going to be like and what the long game was. But at the end of the day, I really just knew in my heart and in my soul that this was the right decision for me. And I knew that if I tried to force myself to continue working in social media and to continue to pretend to be like a quote unquote normal person, that A, I would be incredibly unhappy, and B, I wouldn't be successful in it. So I made the decision to do sex work full time. And around this time, I got scouted on Seeking by this guy who apparently ran a very high-end escort agency for millionaires. So this agency, and these types of agencies do exist, where they only service very wealthy, sometimes high-profile clients. They do not have any public-facing website because everything is so discreet. It's really run on like who you know. So this was this type of situation. I was being proposed really insane amounts of money for doing this type of work. So I was incredibly tempted to work with this agency. The thing is, this agency was ran by a man who was clearly very misogynistic and who would take 50% of all of my bookings. So originally, I thought I would do it for at least a few months and just like make some fucking money. And then if I wanted to leave, I would. But after some time and having a couple phone calls with this guy, I decided to just not go through with it at all because there were just too many red flags. I didn't feel respected by him. I didn't feel safe with him. And I obviously was not keen on giving up 50% of all of the money I made to him just because he handled the bookings and was a dick to me. So I ended up not doing that. But when that happened, that planted the idea in my head of being with an agency and really doing escorting full time as opposed to doing sugaring. And I was recommended by a friend this other agency in Berlin that is more of like a feminist escort collective. And I looked at their website and it sounded so amazing and so perfect and just like the exact type of agency that I would want to be with. Very high end, very good terms of working, and they don't take any cut out of the money you make. So I applied to work with them and I signed with them. It's still going to be a little bit of time before I'm up on their website because we have to finish doing my photo shoot and creating my profile and all these things. So I'm going to talk more about this agency and about working with them when I'm officially with them and when I can share more. But since I made that decision to do escorting, I have been working as an escort independently, just running my own ads, and I also get some inquiries from social media sometimes. And I honestly have been loving it. I prefer escorting to sugaring so much. Escorting has so much more clear boundaries. You know, with sugaring, things can often feel so undefined, and guys want to feel an emotional connection. And, you know, they always want more from you. And in a sense, you also always want more from them. You know, it's like, what can I get my sugar daddy to buy? What can I get him to pay for? Whereas with escorting, it's very clear. You discuss what's going to happen, you discuss what you're going to do, you discuss that you're going to get paid X amount for X hours, and that's it. And I love that clarity. And also, the money is better in escorting than it is with sugaring. So I currently only see like 1 to 2 clients a week. I'm what is referred to as like a high-end, low-volume sex worker. So my prices are quite high and I don't see a ton of clients. And I've only been doing it for a couple of months, but I've already had some really fun experiences and I am like so excited for the future. And I also recently decided to start my OnlyFans again. I kind of just started it on a whim last month, like at 10 p.m. on a Thursday. I was like, I'm going to restart my OnlyFans. And my original idea for it was that it would just be kind of like a supplemental income to the work I was doing. You know, maybe I would make like 1,000 euros a month, you know, just like some extra cash. But I was so surprised at the immediate support I received when I restarted my account. I never officially deleted my OnlyFans account, it just became inactive. So when I restarted it, I sent out a message to all of my former subscribers and I was like, hey, I'm back. And I was so surprised about how many of them resubscribed. And I'm also so surprised about how many new subscribers I've been getting. So I've been getting more serious about doing my OnlyFans content. You know, I'm posting on it a lot more often. And I am also considering, well, not considering, I know that I want to do some porn again. I don't want to do it super regularly. There is one company in particular that I would like to do a film with this year because they have a lot of exposure and their films are really high quality. And I want to work with them more as like a business, like marketing decision for myself because it's going to be really good marketing for me, both as an escort and for my OnlyFans to be on their website again and to remind people of me. And I think I would enjoy the experience as well, but nothing is for sure yet. We'll see if that happens. I am also planning on doing some porn on my OnlyFans, which I never did before. I only ever did softcore stuff before, but I am currently in the process of looking for collaborators to do boy girl scenes with on OnlyFans, and I feel pretty excited about that. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention, going back to my name, Lucy Huxley, because I think it's funny. I keep on trying to run away from this name. When I met up with the woman who runs the escorting agency that I recently signed with, I said, I think I want to pick a new name. I'm not sure if I want my current work to be associated with my past porn work. Like, I kind of want a fresh start. So I suggested the name Lilith, and she was like, that is too cheesy. Too many sex workers use that. And then I told her, I was like, well, the other name I have is Lucy Huxley. And she was like, that is amazing. You should use that. So I was like, okay, I feel like I keep on trying to run away from this name and it keeps on coming back to me. So I have fully accepted it. I do really like the name. As I mentioned before, I do not agree with the reasons I picked it anymore, but I do think it's a beautiful name. I do feel like it's me in a way, and I do like that it is the sex work name that I have always had. It has always been my sex work persona. Not that I feel like it's a different persona than who I really am, but yeah, that's me. I'm Lucy. I'm gonna answer a couple questions because I got a lot on Instagram. Make sure you're following me on Instagram at Lucy Huxley X. I regularly do question boxes and I will answer them on my podcast. The first one is, do I have any regrets about my history in sex work? And the answer is no. But I really don't have any regrets in my life because even things I didn't enjoy or that, looking back, I would make a different decision, those were like crucial lessons and crucial experiences. And, there's nothing in my history in sex work that went really awfully or that I feel like, oh, if I hadn't made this decision, like this would have been so much better. There were definitely ups and downs, but I really don't have any regrets. The other question that I've actually gotten a few times, and I've gotten in on TikTok as well, is what's my plan for the future? Because people, you know, they see that I'm an escort and they're like, well, you can't do this forever. Like, what are you going to do? And I have two answers to this. One is that you can escort for a long time, okay? There are escorts who are 70 who are still fucking working it. If I want to work until I'm old doing this job, I can. But the other thing I have to say about that is I know I'm not going to do this forever because of the type of person I am. I have changed careers like every 2 years throughout my entire life. When I went through this big crisis this winter of changing from doing social media to doing sex work, I was stressed out because I was like, what am I doing with my life? But I was also like, you know what? I've been at this type of crossroads so many times before. I've changed careers so many times, like in multiple other things that I haven't mentioned in this podcast. And I know that I'm gonna figure it out. And I think it's just something that I've learned about myself that, like, every few years, I discover a new incarnation of myself and I decide to go down a new avenue. So I kind of expect that to happen. Maybe I'll be an escort for a few years and then I'll decide I want to do something else. Maybe it will be related to sex work. Maybe it will be something completely different. Maybe I'll do escorting for 20 years. I don't know. And I am okay with that unknown. I guess I kind of find it exciting because at this point, I've gone through so many transitions. I know that I'm going to be able to figure things out no matter what. I know that I'm smart and I know that I can do anything I put my mind to. So I really don't know what the future holds, but I'm not stressed about it. I think that's everything for today. Make sure you tune in next week. I'm going to do a full episode deep diving into porn, my experience with it, my thoughts on it, my thoughts on the concept of ethical porn. I'm going to answer all of your questions about it. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast, leave a review if you enjoyed this episode. My name is Lucy Huxley. I'm a whore, and thank you for joining me in my bedroom.